Do you watch women or men's tennis more? You might say women's, and most people do. And you know why? Let me explain. Although the modern game of tennis originated in England in 1873, the history of the game dates back to the 12th century. At that time in France, players would use the palm of their hand instead of a racket, and the game was called jeu de paume, which literally means the game of palm. Nowadays, men play under the ATP, or Association of Tennis Professionals, and women play under the WTA, which is Women's Tennis Association. Each league hosts tournaments throughout the world and throughout the year. But the most important are the Grand Slam events. They are also called majors, which are the Australian Open, the French Open, Wimbeldon, and the US Open. These events get the most media attention, they have the highest payouts, they attract the best players, and also they offer the most ranking points, which is very valuable when you're a tennis player. The most prominent of the major is, of course, and you probably heard of it, Wimbledon, which is played in London, England every July. Wimbledon started more than 140 years ago and is played on a grass surface, which makes the game move a lot faster. Wimbledon is also very known because of its strict dress code, where players must wear only white. And this tradition dates back to the 18,000s, when players were concerned with inappropriate sweat stains showing on clothing. And by the way, this dress code, as I said, most people know about Wimbledon because they probably, if they don't watch tennis, because they probably heard a scandal surrounding the dress code. Because yes, this dress code has created a lot of controversies throughout the years, because male and female athletes tried several times to bend the rules. In November 2022, Wimbledon added an exception to the dress code for the first time. Right now, female players can wear dark-colored undershorts beneath their skirts or shorts. And we can kind of say that the conversations around the mental stress of having periods while wearing white sparked that change. Although tennis might be old school at heart, it's the only mainstream sport that pays equal prize money in Grand Slam tournaments, and for the most part gives male and female athletes the same airtime on TV. And you know why? Unlike other sports, tennis was at first seen as an appropriate game for women and quote-unquote unathletic men because of its leisurely pace and also from the players' attire. In fact, since men and women could play alongside one another, the sport was actually viewed as a way to meet romantic partners. And for this reason, appearance and style were taken into consideration while playing tennis, to the detriment of practicality or even comfort. For example, men wore blazers and flannel trousers, while women would wear corsets and long kilt skirts. But quickly, players, and that's men and women alike, started picking up the speed and playing a bit more aggressively. It's also important to note that throughout history, women rebelled against the traditional garments and wore more loose-fitting clothes and roll up the sleeves, and clothes started changing throughout history. And actually, there's a lot of sports historians that have talked about style in tennis for men and women actually. The American Billie Jean King is probably one of the most famous female tennis players. She was ranking number 1 6 times between the years 1966 and 1974. She's regarded by many as one of the greatest tennis players of all time, with 39 wins in major titles, so 12 in singles, 16 in women's doubles, and 11 in mixed doubles. She was also one of the most influential players as she brought attention to the women's game through her insistence that men and women should be paid the same prize money in tournaments. King also founded with other women the WTA that we know now. At the same time, another American, Althea Gibson, was also making history by being one of the first Black athletes to break the race barriers in tennis. In 1956, she became the first African American to win a Grand Slam title in France. The following year, she won both Wimbledon and the US Nationals, which was the precursor to the US Open, and then won both again in 1958 and was voted Female Athlete of the Year by the Associated Press in both years. In all, she won 11 Grand Slam tournaments, which include 5 single titles, 5 double titles, and 1 mixed double title. Stephanie Maria Graf, or Steffi Graf, was a German professional tennis player, widely regarded as one of the greatest tennis players of all time. She was ranked number 1 in women's singles for a record of 377 weeks and won 22 major single titles, the second most since the start of the Open era in 1960. So she finds herself behind Serena Williams. In 1988, Graf became the first tennis player to achieve the Golden Slam by winning all 4 major single titles and the Olympic gold medal in the same calendar year. Furthermore, she is the only tennis player, male or female, to have won each major tournament at least 4 times. But of course, and I mentioned her before, we cannot talk about tennis without mentioning Serena Williams, who turned professional in 1995 and retired in 2022. She is basically the GOAT, considered among the greatest tennis player of all time. She was ranked number 1 in singles by the WTA for 319 weeks, which is a lot. And that includes a joint record of 186 consecutive weeks. If most people think of her when we say the word tennis, it's not a coincidence. She won 23 Grand Slam single titles, the most by any player in the Open era. She is the only player, male or female, to accomplish a career Golden Slam in both singles and doubles. Nowadays, some of the best in the world on the women's circuit include Romania's Simona Halep, Japan's Naomi Osaka, Australia's Ashley Barty, and Canada's Bianca Andreescu. But of course, there's a lot more great athletes I could mention. But for the sake of keeping this episode short, let's jump to the next section, which is about rules. In terms of rules, tennis is pretty straightforward, although I might say the scoring system might seem a bit weird when you first watch games. As I mentioned before, tennis is either played individually or in doubles on a court with a racket. And the court can be grass like at Wimbeldon, or clay or a hard surface. The point of the game is to hit the tennis ball over the net so that the opponent can't return the ball. And points are awarded when one player isn't able to get the ball back over the net. Now, where it gets a bit more complicated is that each match is made up of sets, made up of games. So typically, men's matches are best of 5 sets, while women's matches are best of 3 sets. And the first player to win 6 games in a tennis match wins the set. The score of each game goes from 0, and by the way, 0 can be sometimes called love, to 15, 30, and finally 40. If the game is tied 40-40, that's called a deuce, and players have to win 2 straight points in order to win the game. There's more tennis lingo, and I won't go into details about it, but hopefully you get the gist of a game. And that's all for today. If you found this content interesting and you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe to my channel. And if you are on any podcast platform, feel free to share this episode with your friends. Follow the podcast too. Now that you know about tennis, let's keep learning about sports with the athletes' voices.